Be still, Silvaron. Let them speak. The Duchy of Carcassone is home to the Enchantress, a supreme priestess of the Lady of the Lake, as well as a powerful Lord of Life spellcaster, who is capable of causing fear in her enemies and inspiring great devotion in her followers. The image of the Lady effect allows her to field very large, infantry-based armies early into the game, backed up by powerful units such as Grell Guardians, for which she has an upkeep reduction. Finally, her casualty replenishment rate is greatly improved, allowing her armies to shift from one hotspot to another without needing too much downtime. Her starting units of Battle Pilgrims, Grail Guardians, and Blessed Field Trebuchets can deal with any of the early game enemies that Carcassone has to deal with, and last well into the late game as very powerful supporting units. So, without further ado, let us seek out the favor of the Fae as the Duchy of Carcassone. So here we are in the southernmost edge of Bretonnia, playing as the Carcassone, as the Fae Enchantress, in what is probably the easiest of the three Bretonnian starts. Disclaimer, as always, this is all based on my experience in Very Hard and Legendary, so everything here should apply to the lower difficulties, but of course, some of it may or may not be as crucial to prioritize in lower difficulties where things are a little bit easier and more forgiving. And then this is not going to be a general guide sort of thing for Bretonnia. If you want a more general guide for Bretonnia, definitely look at my Bretonnian guide. That goes into much more depth on like just kind of general stuff, like how to build up your cities a bit, like what kind of army compositions are on, that sort of thing. Here I'm very specifically going to be focusing on Carcassonne and some of the unique gimmicks and early game strategies for Carcassonne, because that's really where the Bretonnian factions differ, is in their early game. Their late game is practically identical for all intents and purposes, because you'll basically have the exact same resources, the exact same territory, and all that stuff. So, without further ado, going into Carcassonne, I'm going to go into their strengths and weaknesses. Once again, these are practically identical to the other Bretonnians. Your enemies are fairly well positioned to not really be a threat to you or to be easily managed. You have easy confederation, pretty strong home-based economy, strong cavalry, dirt cheap infantry, strong growth, good control. You do start off with a very strong unit roster, in my opinion, the strongest of the rosters for Bretonnia, especially if you're a new player and can't really cycle charge. Something like Grail Guardians and Battle Pilgrims is definitely better than, say, Lewin's army. And definitely, in my opinion, this is just flat out better than what Bordelot gets. Because these units are much better against what you face in early game. You get strong control, strong early game units, free hero, which is nice. That means you can make your early game structures cheaper. Ease of confederation northward, of course, and you keep all your confederation in one direction, unlike Bordelot, so that's even an advantage there. Well, you're all limited by the peasant economy. The peasant economy for Carcassonne is a little more lenient, because you do get extra 4, I do believe, or 5 slots, I think, for peasant economy. As Carcassonne, which is definitely a nice boost. It means you can field more infantry in the early game, where it's more crucial because you're limited, and you can't really build cavalry because your cavalry's options are really expensive. Fae Enchantress herself, very solid lord. Once again, you have those same solid lord options as every other Bretonnian faction, at least as far as combat is concerned. Pretty easy access to heroes, paladins being available at tier 2, confederation all being in a tech tree, which makes it very easy. And yeah, pretty strong trade, though not as strong as the other Bretonnian factions, because early on you only have contact with Cornelis and Bordelot. Disadvantages are basically the same as well. Though the Fae Enchantress is a bit of a weaker, straight-up combat lord than, say, significantly weaker than Lewin and Bordelot, but more importantly, your early game infantry your infantry in period is trash, unless backed by Grail Relique, with the exception of the Foot Squires and the Battle Pilgrims. Your cavalry is pretty expensive, meaning that you end up with armies that are fairly cost inefficient. Yeah, there's definitely an issue there. Your garrisons are terrible, of course, even though you do get free walls, which is a nice thing. Chivalry, as usual, I think that's a net disadvantage, though of course there are perks that come with it, various buffs to all your armies, and of course access to Green Knight. But by and large, every chivalry has a disadvantage. Of course, peasant economy is a significant disadvantage. Your army skills or army technology are both very weak. Though interestingly enough, the Fae Enchantress is, in my opinion, the only Bretonnian lord with a fairly solid army skill lineup. still not ideal by my standards, but by my expectations compared to, say, a faction like Scarsnake, much less, or even Empire and Wood Elves and those factions. Like, it is just not comparable as far as the skills go, but it is definitely, in my opinion, but it is definitely a lot more solid than what the other Bretonnian lords, whether generic or unique, offer. Even Bordelot with his unique squire abilities or skills. So definitely a perk there. And it allows the Fan Enchantress to have a fairly unique unique army comp in her own army that I'll go over in a little bit. But otherwise, going over early game. So Carcassone is limited by, is basically stuck dealing with the same stuff Bretonnia and Bordelot has to deal with, and that is greenskin or orc incursions in the first 20 turns. Turn 2, you get hit by them, and they stick around for the next 20 turns, and that means you'll be constantly dealing with revolts. Now, Carcassone is way out of the way. They can't really deal with any of the nearby orcs. They can't deal with the Skull Smashers to undo that, so you're stuck defending, and you can't really go conquer Bilbali. You will have your two enemies, the Beastmen and the Wood Elves, are nearby. The Wood Elves, I would ignore them. Try to make peace with them if you possibly can, or wait for them to make peace with you. Don't go to war with them. Don't invade. Don't try to fight them. You'll lose. You don't really have the early game units to fight them with. Beastmen are easy to crush. They'll probably meander into your territory. You can just pick them off. You're in early game, you might want to invade Estalia. Don't do it until the greenskin incursions have worn off, because you will not be able to hold it, and you will then come under pressure from Estalian armies, and you will not be able to deal with them with the Fan Enchantress's army, because you'll be getting pressured by revolts and at the same time pressured by Estalia. It's just a terrible combination to be stuck up against. So first 20 turns, spend them sort of leveling up your lords and heroes, or lord and hero, farming these rebellions. Early game, I would recommend attempting to confederate into Paravon. That should be your priority, and definitely make peace with the Wood Elves if at all possible. And after you've confederated Paravon, try to confederate Bastogne afterwards. That should be kind of your slow climb northward. Bastogne and ultimately Bordelot. So I do think your confederation will be the slowest of the three Bretonnian factions, but that is okay, because as soon as the greenskin incursions wear off, especially if you manage to get peace with the Wood Elves, I would recommend striking out south. Take your full stack with the Fan Enchantress and maybe a half stack of infantry and supporting cavalry units, that sort of stuff, and strike south into Estalia. Try to take control of all of Estalia to give you an additional boost to economy, even as you're slowly confederating your way northward. Once you control all of Estalia, make sure to leave half a stack there. Now, Estalia, Empire units are generally better than yours, as far as, especially better than your infantry, but with clever use of your trebuchets, with good use of your Grail Guardians, and your archers, and like even your battle programs are very solid, as well as your spells. The Fan Enchantress can definitely fight our way through it. With recent reworks, if you're capable of getting leveled up enough, Dwellers Below can basically solo enemy armies. They do immense amounts of damage now to practically any unit they catch. Though they are, of course, fairly expensive. But if you can get Dwellers Below, definitely try to tick up her spell roster early on, and then I would generally follow that up with the army skill tree. Of course, do pick up Silvaron and pick up Power Familiar and Girdle of Gold. Honestly, actually, all of her top line is good. So generally, I would recommend spells, army skills, touch on Root Marcher, and then Silvaron and the top line of skills as well. So that would be my recommendation for specifically building the Fan Enchantress, and utilizing that, crush your way through the Empire factions with about 1.5 stacks of units. Make sure to leave a half stack sitting in Estalia once you've occupied it, because you will be, well, first of all, Beastmen always spawn here, around this area of Estalia, and second of all, Tilia can sometimes decide to declare war on you and backstab you. So you want to be ready for that, ready to resist and stop them if they attempt that. Once you've taken Estalia, make sure to confederate your way north. Try to confederate Bordelot and Bastogne at about the same time, so you can then hit Mousillon once again with that combination of pushes all at the same time, and knock them out quickly. Then you confederate Lyonesse, of course, Artois, make your way up to Bretonnia, confederate Bretonnia, and finish it off by killing off the Skull Smashers and taking Marienburg. Do be aware, as usual, if the Wood Elves hate you, if they're at war with you, be aware that Carcassone might backstab you. This seems to be a common theme in my experience, and so definitely, once again, be very aware of that. Be ready to counterattack or that sort of stuff. I'll be ready that they might attack and sack or raise Montfort. Definitely something to have keep an eye out for. And otherwise, there's not much to say for early game with Carcassone. You basically push southward, build up the Fan Enchantress' spells first, pick up Silverone once you get level 7. Do try to pick up all her ultimately do try to pick up all her top skills. And in the bottom, in the army line, definitely try to get Inspiring Presence, Peasant's Duty, Lowborn Militia, Worshippers of the Grail, Rally, Blessed Water, in my opinion, Guardians of the Lady, Engines of War, Secrets of the Grail. Those are all very solid options as far as your abilities go. If you don't really want to do Grail Vow units, which only really affects your Grail Guardians, you can not do that. I normally wouldn't invest in Knight's Vows for the Fan Enchantress, though you certainly can if you want to run more cavalry. Normally that wouldn't do it. I simply don't think I think she's much more oriented to infantry, and generally I run a very infantry-heavy strategy. Always make sure to invest in Route Marcher. I do think that's a basically mandatory skill on every lord you have. But otherwise, you don't really have to invest. You don't even have to invest in Lightning Strike with her. And do try to level, make use of the Damsel in early game, especially to reduce your costs. For early game building structures, obviously your building structure is going to be the same as far as economy. Doubled up, maxed out economy buildings, preferably farms, just because they get crank out a little bit more money. And then the third structure, either economy building or perhaps a unit or like support structure, but generally just the third economy building, like either a harbor or something like that. In early game, I would scrap the peasants you start off with, the 3 peasant mobs, just get rid of them, and build up a bunch of swords. You can't quite max out on swords, but you can definitely get a pretty solid infantry blob here, and you can kind of use that, veteran them up a little bit, make them more experienced, make them more competent. And once you've maxed out Fan Enchantress' army, scrap the barracks, and you make sure to build the stables right off the bat. You should definitely deploy your Damsel before you do that, so that way you get the discount. And ultimately in Carcassone, my recommended building structure lineup would be the Tower of the Enchantress, the Cathedral of the Lady, or the Grail Shrine line of buildings, and then stables, going up to the Royal Stables. And the reason for this is because if you get Royal Stables, you can then get Grail Guardians, and Grail Guardians are a very strong unit. They're very tanky. They're not necessarily, they hit like wet noodles. I've said this plenty of times in my quick match videos, but they're very, very tanky. They can actually be made even tankier by Fan Enchantress' skill. I do believe it's like Defenders of the Grail or something. And finally, the last 2 slots I would take up with farms, just to increase income. Early game, I would replace the barracks with a die maker or Cinemar binding pit, because it's cheap and only takes up 1 slot. Because your early game, you're relying more on trade with your other Bretonnian neighbors, you can definitely make good amounts of money off of that. And yeah, otherwise just level up to tier 3, usual Bretonnian stuff. And once you've controlled all of Bretonnia and Marienburg, obviously make sure to try to use Bordelot to farm extra cash in Marienburg with the Yield of the Sea skill. You should, of course, confederate, so you should end up with all the lords. And yeah, after that, it's on to the late game. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hop on over to a more late game situation with Carcassone and discuss a handful of the late game issues or things to consider with them. So here we are in a bit of a late game situation with Bretonnia. There was a few things I wanted to touch on here. First and foremost is attrition and chaos waste, and this is why I don't recommend ever doing the chaos side of the chaos Wars of Errantry event. As you can see, I'm losing about 75% of my army in a single turn of attrition up in the chaos waste, and this is with the technology to reduce chaos territory attrition, as well as Norscan, I do believe this the Pride immunity is no attrition, so that shouldn't even be happening, but it doesn't matter. This chaos, and it's still taking atrocious attrition. This is simply insufferable. So, yeah, losing about 70%, 75% of my army in the chaos waste, and this is why I don't recommend doing it. And you need to, because you need to march through all your chaos raised territories. You need to really overcommit forces to this, and that is just really rather unfortunate. I simply cannot recommend it. The battle's not much harder than, I wouldn't say it's any harder really than the greenskin one, but definitely it's yeah, it's not much harder than the greenskin one. It's just more frustrating, and you have to invest much more in it. As you can see in this game, I vassalized Marienburg rather than occupying him. Definitely a bit of a mistake in retrospect, but hindsight 2020, 50-50 was what to say. But and as you can see, you can be friends with definitely be friends with Blackstone Post, Carcassone, all those people. So yeah, definitely be on the lookout for that. Definitely be willing to jump in on that and to take advantage of it. As you can see, in this gameplay, I did go for some fortifications occasionally, every now and then. I do sometimes find them useful, but usually I wouldn't recommend them. This game, because I was leaving with so many of my forces, I decided to build some fortifications. And as you can see, it's costing me economically here. But yeah, that's practically speaking, that's really it for late game. Make sure to build your unique structures for Bretonnia, things like the Abbey of the Grail Companions, or Carcassone Tournament Grounds, and all that sort of stuff. And down south in Carcassone, make sure you're building your Grail Chapel and your Tower of the Enchantress and all that sort of stuff. So definitely be on the lookout for those things. Do try to be friendly with the elves. Don't go to war with them. That is a huge, I think this is a huge lesson or thing just for Bretonnia in general, but Carcassone in particular, because you start at war with them and you start so close with them to begin with. Try not to go to war with them. I would never recommend doing the technology for Forest Edge Decree. Until like very late game, like after you're basically done the campaign and you're just fighting everybody. At that point maybe do Forest Edge Decree, just when you're going off to slaughter the Wood Elves. But with the exception of that, I would never really bother with this. It's simply not worth it. It's much you're not going to make money really, or very good money fighting the Wood Elves. You're simply going to have to march in camp stands and deal with attrition, and it's just very frustrating. So yeah. That would be my recommendation. As you can see, this is a bit of an older replay. This was pre-Norska patch, but nothing's really changed since then. Here I would definitely recommend when you're doing the final quest, whether you're doing greenskins or chaos, try to use your combat lords. Use Lewin, use Bordello. Generally, you want Bordellos camping out at Marienburg, but use Lewin usually to do the final quest, because you don't have to. You're not forced to use the Fan Enchantress. It doesn't matter who you use. And having combat lords is just very solid. I mean, it gives you the ability to just dish out a lot of hurt. Yeah, it just gives you a much tankier lord option. It's just very strong on several levels. And whereas the Fan Enchantress, she's not weak. Don't get me wrong, but she can't really fight, and you're better off just bringing a dedicated spellcaster and backing up a combat lord, in my humble opinion. Especially if it's someone like Lewin. Backed by a lot of flying cavalry like Royal Hippogriff Knights that we can see here. Whereas the Fan Enchantress is just better as a holding force sort of hero, defending home base and that sort of stuff. Because she doesn't really have to deal with those penalties for chivalry loss, and she doesn't, as far as I can tell. And her infantry is pretty solid. That sort of stuff. So yeah, that's really it for Carcassone. If you want more general tips and tricks on Bretonnia, definitely go check out my guide on Bretonnia. It's much more in depth as to the specifics of playing as them. So yeah, I do hope you guys enjoyed this guide. A quick rundown of things. Make sure to try to take Estalia as quick as you can, and then wait out Greenskin incursions, take Estalia, and then push northward and confederate everything. And once you and make sure to take Marienburg. Don't do what I did here, where I didn't confederate Marienburg. That's definitely a bit of a mistake. And once you're set with that, you're basically set as far as Bretonnia goes. And do the Greenskin campaign mission, unless you really want to, or the Greenskin objective, unless you really want to fight against Chaos, I guess. I don't know. There's no real reason to do Chaos, in my opinion. So yeah, I do hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. Every little bit helps. If you have any comments, criticism, anything you think I missed, any little specifics about Carcassone you think people should know, be sure to leave those down in the comments as well. I'll be sure to respond as soon as I can to any comments. I will hopefully be getting up the rest of Wolfric campaign over the course of the next few days, or maybe a few weeks. We'll see. Definitely gonna be going through Wolfric's campaign though, and I'll be moving on to the Wood Elves next. So that is the next set of guides, because I'm just going straight down the list. Wood Elves and then Arguelon. So as usual, I do hope you guys enjoyed, and I appreciate you all for watching. And Wyvern out.